I like things my way. My coffee, my schedule, and my treatment. So I talked to my doctor about self-injecting with the Vyvgart Hytrulo pre-filled syringe, which contains F-gartigimod alpha and hyaluronidase QVFC. It's injected under your skin, subcutaneously. It means I can inject in my space, on my time. It's my treatment, my way. Visit VyvgartMyWay.com. That's VYVGART myway.com. And talk to your doctor about Vyvgart Hytrulo. Brought to you by argenx.
This is Danielle Robay from Bookmarked by Reese's Book Club. A new car is kind of like a new book. It takes you places you never thought you could go. What will you drive into the next chapter of your life? It's fun to dream about your next car, but when you're done dreaming, you need to head to Cars.com. Cars.com has the tools and expert advice to help you find your dream car. Their advanced search filters allow you to explore 2 million new and used cars so that you can find the perfect car. Start your search with Cars.com. Where to next?
The Stuart Highway in the middle of December is a challenging place to be. It runs south from Katherine, dead straight. A thin grey ribbon laid over a country that simply does not end. Or at the very least, if you're driving it, it sure feels that way. On the 16th of December 2017, a family's tackling this challenging task. Mum, Dad and a little girl in the back seat. The temperature gauge in the car sits well into the 40s and the hazy air above the road buckles and swims so the horizon never quite holds still. There's almost nothing to mark the distance. A wrecked tyre here, a dead beast by the side of the road, a termite mound taller than a man. The white lines continue to tick under the bonnet, one after the other, mesmerising. And Mum's gently snoring in the passenger seat. The little girl is so bored that she even looks forward to the occasional road train that comes the other way. 3 trailers and a wall of noise, and for a second or two it fills the whole windscreen before it's gone. And the silence pours back in. The family left Katherine just after lunch, and before they went, they stopped at the supermarket and bought a barbecue chook. A tradie's handbag, as it's affectionately known in these parts. They've eaten most of it somewhere along the way, and the rest they've kept in the bag, just in case. The air conditioning in the car hums, the kilometres unwind. And then, not long after Dad wound down his window to get a bit of fresh air and keep himself awake, something appears on the horizon. It's pink. They've arrived at Larrimah. There's not a great deal to see here. There's a pub, painted a defiant salmon pink, with a great concrete beer stubby standing by the road, and a statue of the Pink Panther lounging at the front. There's a tea house across the highway, and a scatter of small houses, half of them looking completely abandoned. A population, if you counted every soul in town that day, of about a dozen people. The family pulls in and they have their lunch, and then they wander across to the pub for a cold drink. Because they've heard somewhere on their travels that the pub at Larrimah also has something of a little zoo. Peacocks, birds, and even a saltwater crocodile that's longer than a car. And out the front of the pub, in a chair, on the left of the main entrance, there's an old man. He's small, wiry, wearing a ratty old baseball cap, a can of 4X Gold in his hand. And beside him, its lead tied to the leg of a chair, sits a young red kelpie, who, they're told, is normally a little shy of strangers. But the dog seems to take an instant liking to the little girl. The girl's mother, as mothers do to mark this fleeting moment, lifts her phone and takes a few photographs of her daughter with the dog, at the front of a pub, in the middle of nowhere, with an old man in the back of the frame. As the light begins to fall, the old man stands up. The dog instinctively hops up onto the back of his red quad bike. She knows it's time to head home now. The mother notices this and holding the bag with the last of the chicken in it, she asks whether he'd like it for the dog. He says he would, and he thanks her. And then he starts the bike and rides off into the dimming light, the dog on the back, the chicken on his lap, towards a house a few hundred metres up the road. The old man's name is Paddy Moriarty, and everyone calls him Paddy. And no one in Larrimah, no one anywhere, will ever see him or his dog again. Welcome back to Strewth. I'm your storyteller, Mark, and this is A Man and His Dog, a tale I'm going to tell you in two parts. And part one is about the man, his dog, and the strange happenings that occurred in the town they called home, Laramar in the Northern Territory. It's about 158 kilometres south of Katherine, and roughly 430 from Darwin. The country out here is low scrub and red earth and termite mounds, flat to the horizon in every direction. It's the kind of land that is so epic in scale that it makes a road train look like a toy, and a human being like nothing at all. There's no mobile reception, and the nearest services are at Mataranka, 76 kilometres to the north. Of all the places in the world that carry the title middle of nowhere, Larrimah makes the other contenders look downright cosmopolitan. The name of the town itself is said to come from a local Aboriginal word meaning a meeting place. It began as a railway town. The old North Australian Railway pushed south through here, and in the years around 1940, Larrimah grew up around the railhead. And then came the war. And after the bombing of Darwin in February 1942, the army poured down the highway and Larrimah became a staging post. A place where men and machines were gathered and stored and sent on. Just up the road at Gorrie, they built an airfield, and at its height there were thousands of personnel stationed in the area. And so for a few short years, this patch of nowhere was one of the busiest places in the territory. And then, of course, the war ended. And the men went home, and the town began the long business of dying. The railway carried iron ore for a little while, and then in 1981 the train stopped altogether. The population fell the way these numbers always fall in the bush. Down to 100, then 50, 25. And by the time our story begins, the official count for Larrimah was around 11 or 12 people, depending on how you classify someone as a resident. In other words, you could have fitted the entire town in the back of an old Kingswood ute, if you were so inclined. But it still had a pub. It still has a pub. The Laramar Hotel, as we mentioned, is painted a conspicuous shade of salmon pink. Inside and out, it is gloriously, defiantly daft. At the time of our story, it also boasted a menagerie of more than 700 birds and animals, peacocks wandering the dust, and that crocodile, 3.5 metres of prehistoric impatience, in a very small pen. And so this, dear listeners, is the unique stage for today's story. A dozen people, give or take, scattered across a few hundred metres of a dying town on the longest road in the Northern Territory. People who, for the most part, had come here precisely because it was in the middle of nowhere. It was somewhere where you could be left alone. But the scale of Larrimah frequently had the opposite effect. In a place that small, that isolated, there's nowhere to put a grievance down. There's nowhere it can go to cool off. It just sits there, sometimes staring at you from across the road, every single day. Patrick Joseph Moriarty was born in Limerick, in Ireland, on the 30th of March 1947. His mother was named Mary. His father's name was never recorded on his birth certificate, and he spoke, later, of a childhood that was poor. And so at 18 he got on a boat and he came to Australia, and he never went back. And as far as anyone has ever been able to establish, he left no family behind him. No wife, no children that anyone heard of, and when he vanished decades later, there was no next of kin to telephone. What he had instead was the bush. He went on to the cattle stations and he became a ringer, a stockman, and over the years a grader driver and general station hand. One of those hard, capable, weathered men the inland runs on. He rode in rodeos too, and in 1996 in Darwin he even won a belt buckle, something that he was very proud of for the rest of his life. He had a partner in Australia once, a woman named Dorothy, who had worked the stations too. They were separated though when she retired, and she died about 17 years before he did. And after that, there was no one in that way. And so by the time he settled in Larrimah, he was an old man, small, around 5'5" and 10.5 stone, wiry from a life of physical work. His heart wasn't perfect. He'd had stents put in back in 2006, and he was completely bald and quite sensitive about the topic, so he was never seen outside without a cap or his cowboy hat. And he wore thongs everywhere, which isn't a particularly unusual habit in the Northern Territory. Paddy liked things just so. His house, the old disused service station he bought for $30,000 and christened the top of the town, was kept absolutely spotless, everything in its place. His days too ran like absolute clockwork, and the whole town could have set their watches by him. In the morning he walked his dog down the rubbish dump road and back, and after that he rode his red Honda quad bike to the pub with his dog on the back. But before he got to the important business of drinking, he worked. He cleaned the camp toilets and showers. He did the laundry, made up the rooms, tended to the gardens. He did this not really for money, but more for purpose and for a beer. So every afternoon, he got to the part of the day that he'd earned, and he would sit, always in the same chair, on the left of the main entrance, and his routine even governed by the drinking. At about 2:30, he'd put $40 through the till. 20 would buy him 4 cans of 4X Gold, which he'd stash in a little fridge by the door. And when those were gone, the other 20 bought another 4. 8 cans, never more, never fewer. He was also, by every account, a character, a larrikin. He greeted the tourists who pulled in off the highway with a cheerful, "G'day folks, where you from?" And he loved a yarn. He was also, by every account, someone who liked to stir trouble. And sometimes his stirring took the form of charming and funny. But on other occasions it could be far more needling and prickly. Often both of these things occurred in the same afternoon. And so he was, in other words, a thoroughly Australian sort of man, in a thoroughly Australian sort of place. He was also completely content with this. He told the barman on more than one occasion that he intended to live to be 100, right here in Larrimah. For most of his Laramar years, Paddy's constant companion was a black and white border collie named Rover, and the two of them were inseparable, to the point where the locals used to joke that Rover was Paddy's wife. Where Paddy went, Rover went. The lead looped around the leg of the chair at the pub, the dog on the back of the quad bike, ears flat in the wind. But sadly, as they always do too soon, Rover died in December of 2016. And for the better part of a year, Paddy was a man without a dog, which for him was a kind of incompleteness. And so, in early November 2017, a friend who worked on a nearby cattle station gave him a young red kelpie. She was about 11 months old and her name was Kellie. You see, a kelpie raised on a working station is supposed to be a working dog, and the people who gave her to Paddy were happy to part with her for a particular reason. Kellie wouldn't run with the pack. She was too soft for it. She was turning into a pet rather than a worker, shy around the other dogs and the cattle, uneasy around strangers. And on a cattle station, that's a dog with no purpose. But to a lonely man in a dying town, Kellie was absolutely perfect. And so Paddy took her on, and within a few weeks she'd slotted into the routine where Rover used to be. The morning walk, the trip down to the pub on the quad bike, the lead tied to the chair at the pub, a small, shy red dog and a small, wiry old man, going about their unvarying days together, and happy about it. Now it's time to introduce you to another of the locals who plays a big part in this story. Directly across the highway from the top of the town where Paddy lived stood Fran's tea house. Frances Hodgetts had been in the Northern Territory for 50 years, 45 of them in Larrimah, and she had run her tea house for 35. She made pies, exotic ones that drew the tourists in, camel, crocodile, buffalo. And she had, in fact, known Paddy a very long time. They'd first met decades earlier at the Dally Waters pub, down the road, relatively speaking. And when he first moved across the highway from her, they were on perfectly good terms. But that did not last. Over time, the relationship between the man on one side of the highway and the woman on the other curdled into one of the great small-town feuds. The flashpoints were almost comically petty, which is exactly how these things always start. There was a dispute over parking, over whether tourists could leave their caravans on the forecourt of Paddy's place to walk across to the tea house. Paddy, defiant, fenced part of it off, and there was a sign. Paddy put up a board advertising that the pub had the best pies in town, which, with the tea house 20 metres away, was not a particularly neighbourly thing to do. And it escalated from there into a decade of accusation. Between 2010 and 2017, Fran made no less than 9 separate complaints to police about Paddy. There was a stolen red umbrella, tourists that were threatened about eating her pies, a glass bottle placed under a car tyre, plants that she believed had been poisoned, CCTV cables that had been cut. There were even dead kangaroos thrown into her yard, which she found in the morning, sitting underneath her bedroom window. And perhaps most bizarrely, there was a reported incident that involved a wild donkey that had wound up as roadkill. Evidently, this donkey's manhood had been removed by Paddy and thrown in Fran's general direction. And if that wasn't bad enough, this particular incident led to wild speculation about the ingredients that could be found in Fran's famous pies. She sought a trespass notice against him, and she got one. She applied to court too for a restraining order, but that case didn't go away. The application was dismissed, and she was ordered to pay Paddy $500 in costs. It got so bad that in September of 2016, the two of them sat down and signed an actual written agreement to be civil to one another. They agreed, in writing, to limit their interactions to necessity, to respect each other's privacy, and to leave past matters in the past. That was 2016, and it held, more or less, for a little while. But then, in the spring of 2017, a new figure arrives in our story. His name is Owen Laurie, and he was a man in his early 70s at the time, a former railway and timber and mine worker. He'd answered an advertisement Fran had placed in the Catherine paper for a gardener and a caretaker. He moved into a small bungalow on a property in early September. Unlike the other locals in town, Owen kept very much to himself. He didn't drink at the pub, and most of the town barely sat eyes on him. His job, as he understood it, was to look after Fran's garden. The very same garden that Fran believed had been poisoned by Paddy on more than one occasion. And it was the garden, in the end, and the dog, that brought this new tension to the boil. Because young Kellie, as soft and shy as she was, had one untrained habit. She'd wander. She'd cross the highway and turn up at the fence line of Fran's place, and she'd bark her pretty little head off. And in the days just before Paddy disappeared, there were words between the two men over the dog crossing the road. Exactly what was said and in what tone is disputed, and the accounts given later, unsurprisingly, didn't match. But it is on the record, because he confirmed it himself at the inquest, that at some point, not long after he arrived, while he was putting new plants in along the fence and was warned they might be tampered with, that Owen Laurie made a remark. He said, clearly, that if anyone came in and poisoned his garden, it would lead to the first murder in Larrimah. He has since said, and maintains, that he meant it as a joke, a bit of bush bravado over a flower bed. At the time, that is surely all anyone took it for. It was weeks before anyone vanished. It's the kind of thing that people do say. But it's only later, looking back down the length of the story, that a line like that stops sounding like a joke.
A burst pipe, a dead water heater, the AC calling it quits. Who do you call? HomeServe is an easy way to handle unexpected home repairs, with plans covering stuff basic homeowners insurance usually won't. Instead of scrambling for a contractor, you make one call to get the repair process started. Join the millions of customers who trust HomeServe right now. Go to homeserve.com/podcast for 50% less your first year. That's homeserve.com/podcast. Savings compared to renewal price. Void in Florida.
Have you ever wondered why some people seem to age slower? Like they figured out some secret the rest of us missed? Well, it turns out someone actually did. And it starts with a melon. Yep, a melon. There's a rare French melon that stays fresh 4 times longer than the fruit you and I buy at the store. Scientists discovered it produces an extraordinarily high level of a super antioxidant called SOD, the kind that helps defend skin from the visible signs of aging. And get this, Meaningful Beauty partnered with world-renowned French cosmetic specialist Dr. Jean-Louis Sabat to capture that melon's youth-preserving power in a skincare line you can actually use every day. So if you're tired of trying products that all promise the same thing, this one is truly different because it starts with something nature designed to stay young. Subscribe today and get the complete introductory system for just $49.95 at meaningfulbeauty.com. You'll also get 2 free gifts, free shipping, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Visit meaningfulbeauty.com and order today.
And that leads us to Saturday, the 16th of December, 2017. And Paddy followed his routine to the letter. At around 9 in the morning, he rode to the pub on his red quad bike, Kellie on the back. He cleaned the toilets and the showers thoroughly, and at about 2:30, he put his $40 through the till. 2 lots of 20 for his 8 cans, exactly as he always did. And he settled down and sat in his chair to the left of the door. That was, of course, the afternoon that the family on the road trip from Catherine pulled in. The little girl who patted the shy red dog. The mother who took the photographs. Photographs that show Paddy sitting in his usual chair, doing the most ordinary thing in the world. And those would turn out to be the last known images of him alive. Before he left, he told the publican Barry Sharp that he wouldn't be coming to work the next day, a Sunday, but that he'd drop by at lunchtime to borrow the mower because he wanted to cut his own grass. A small, forward-looking, completely mundane plan. The plan of a man who intended to come in tomorrow. The barman, Richard, Reckon Paddy left a little later than usual that evening, towards 6:30. He was wearing his thongs, work shorts, a blue flannelette shirt and his black cap with the Pink Panther logo on it. The light was starting to go, and he told Kellie, "Get up," on the back of the bike. He took the bag of leftover chicken the tourist had handed him, and he rode the few 100 metres home, across the highway, to the top of the town. We know that he made it home, and we also know roughly what he did because of what was found later, frozen in time. He took the half-eaten chicken inside and put it in the microwave. He set his cap down in its usual spot, took off his reading glasses that he was pretty useless without, and also placed his wallet, which still had over $200 in it, down on the table. He put some dog biscuits in Kellie's bowl in the bedroom and switched on the pedestal fan so it pointed at the bed to fight against the evening heat. He got his own dinner out of the freezer and set it out on the table, food in containers getting ready to eat. A man and his dog home for the night, just beginning to settle in. At about 10:30 that evening, a heavy burst of rain swept over Larrimah. It hammered down for a while and then it cleared. And by morning the country was steaming and the sky was washed clean. And that is the end of the record of Paddy Moriarty doing anything at all. Somewhere between setting out his dinner that he didn't end up eating and the rain at 10:30, the most reliable man in Laramar stepped out of his own evening and did not come back to it. The chicken stayed in the microwave. The dinner stayed on the table. The fan kept turning, pointed at an empty bed. As we explained, Paddy wasn't due to work at the pub on Sunday, but he did tell Barry Sharp that he'd be in to borrow the mower. And lunchtime came and went, and he didn't appear, which on its own, a bloke not turning up for a mower, is hardly an emergency. And so Barry let it go, and Sunday passed. By the middle of Monday morning, though, with still no sign of him, no quad bike rattling up to the pub. No, "G'day, folks." The publican's unease had sharpened into something he couldn't quite talk himself out of. And so he got into his vehicle and drove the very short distance up to the top of the town to check in on his mate. He knocked. He called out. Nothing. He found the back screen door unlocked, which is not unusual in and of itself, and so he let himself in. But the house stopped him, because it just felt wrong. Not in any dramatic kind of way. There was no sign of a struggle, nothing broken, nothing flung about, no blood sitting anywhere. It just felt weird because it was so calm and so empty. The place was as neat as Paddy always kept it, but Paddy wasn't in it, and neither was Kellie. The back gate stood open. Barry, reasonable as anyone would be, told himself that Paddy had probably taken the dog for a walk. And he drove the rubbish dump road looking for him, but still found nothing, and went back to the pub. It wasn't until the Tuesday that the unease turned into something far more like dread. Two of the town's other residents, Mark and Karen Rayner, who were among the few people in town Paddy counted as real friends, went up to the property to look properly. And the longer they spent inside that little house, the more its silence began to press on them. Because the place was not ransacked, it was not disturbed. It was as though Paddy had stood up in the middle of his evening and walked straight out the door. They noticed other things too. The rain gauge by the house hadn't been emptied. It had bucketed down, as we said on the Saturday night, and Paddy emptied that gauge every morning of his life, like clockwork. And yet there it sat, still holding Saturday's water, like a small, unanswered question. His sunglasses hung on the left handle of the quad bike where they always lived. The quad bike was parked well and truly under the carport, and so was his four-wheel drive. The keys to the quad were on the table inside. His medication, which he needed, was still in the fridge, and his wallet lay on the table with more than $200 in it. And they saw The hats. I can't overstate how much that meant to Mark and Karen. Paddy was bald and quietly quite ashamed of it, sensitive about the very shape of his own head, and in all the years that anyone had known him, not one of them had ever once seen him step outside without something on his bonds. The everyday baseball cap and the cowboy hat that he kept for good occasions. They were as much a part of him as his thongs or his dog, and a man like Paddy no more walked out of his own front door bareheaded than he'd have walked out without his trousers. And yet both of these hats were still sitting there in the house. The cap sat on the table beside his reading glasses and bank card, and the cowboy hat was in its place. Wherever Paddy had gone, he'd gone out into the heat and to the hard territory glare with nothing on his head at all. And once you realise that, you can't stop thinking about what it tells you. Whatever took Paddy Moriarty out of that house, he didn't choose the moment. This was not of his planning. He didn't even have time to stop for his hat. He didn't stop for anything. The fact that he kept the back gate open was also strange. He kept it shut against the feral donkeys whenever he went away for any extended period of time. And so every object, every bit of evidence in that house looked like a man who had stepped outside for 2 minutes and fully intended to come straight back in. The rain has searched the roads and the verges for more than 3 hours. 20 metres out on either side, telling themselves the gentle version. The one where Paddy had taken Kellie for a walk and his old heart had finally caught up with him somewhere out in the scrub. The dog staying loyally by his side. But they found nothing. Not Paddy, not the dog. And so they drove back to the pub. They talked to Barry Sharp, and they decided to ring the police. Barry made the call at 4 o'clock on the afternoon of Tuesday the 19th of December. And by then Paddy Moriarty had been gone for the better part of 3 days, and his town was only just beginning to understand that he hadn't simply gone walkabout. So what happens when a man and his dog step off the edge of the world a few hundred metres from home? And the only people who could possibly know what happened are the 11 neighbours still standing there in the dust. Well, that's what we'll try and figure out in part 2 of A Man and His Dog. We'll cover the search, the tapes, the inquest, and a coroner who said the word out loud. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Strewth. Part 2 will be out on Friday, so not too long to wait. In the meantime, make sure you check out the Facebook and Instagram groups. All sorts of stuff happening over there, plenty of good discussion. And if you just can't wait, if you want to listen to Part 2 right now, all you have to do is subscribe to Strewth Premium over on Patreon. Our Strewth Premium subscribers each and every week get early access to our regular feed without any ads. And they also get a bonus episode, predominantly made up of Strewth Abroad cases, which are the crazy mysteries from around the world that I don't get a chance to share here on Strewth. There's links in the show notes if you're interested in that. But if not, I'll catch you on Friday. Hooroo.